Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the series What If Naruto Mastered to Edit Seals Part 10. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Wave had changed so quickly that she could hardly believe it. Not even 2 weeks ago, Tsunami had walked her through the market as his guide, and she was shocked by how the people of the country lived. Now, just a few days after the wolves turned on their boss, everything in Nami no Kuni seemed to be getting better. People no longer huddled in empty buildings. Instead, they used the materials in Gado's huge warehouses to fix them up and make them look like they did before. Once, the only sounds on the docks were the quiet chatter of workers and the drunken laughter of Gado's forces. Now, however, the docks were full of activity as goods were loaded onto and off of repossessed ships. Children were happy to watch the new sailors move around as they waited for a fish to bite their line so they could bring fresh food back to their families. For the first time in years, there was hope in the air, but she couldn't help but feel like something was off about the whole thing. Masks with angry faces were crouching on the buildings that were being fixed up by workers. Their eyes watched everything that happened in their new territory. Small patrols moved through the streets to keep things in order in the busy town, but it felt like these people were cut off from the rest of the world. There was a clear gap between the people of Wave and the people who came to save them. How far apart man and beast are? Naruto wasn't sure what to think. People were happy, but how long would that last? Were the wolves only interested because her team was there and they didn't want to attract more attention from one of the 5 bigger villages? When they left, would everything change again, or was this to remain the new Wave, a place of hope and joy? Maybe that was what upset her. People were still partying while they worked, and the sounds of laughter and cheer filled the air. Meanwhile, wolves stood by and watched them with a cold look on their faces. The wolves kept a scary watch over the village without making a sound if they could help it. Maybe it was this clash that made her feel bad. Her blue eyes moved from the town and the people who said they were protecting it to the bandages on her body. She knew it was a bad idea, but she didn't have much else to do. She used to feel nothing but comforting warmth when she tried to do this, but now all she felt was a merciless fire that only wanted to eat her flesh with its maddening power. But the pain it caused, the agony that tore through her body and burned at her mind, was nothing compared to the last time she looked into the eyes of its true master. When she looked into those angry eyes, they were so full of rage that she could barely think straight. Every word she said that day came out as a cracking hiss from between painted lips. The Kyuubi no Kitsune was not happy. She knew why, too. They had known for a long time that they both wanted the other. Back then, giving the ancient being of chakra what she wanted seemed so easy. After all, she was excited to see her brother again, too. Things weren't always so easy. Her brother had changed while they were gone, being shaped by a world without them. His new world didn't have room for them. He was no longer the boy who would do anything to make her happy and take care of her needs. Instead, he was a cold young man who wouldn't do anything to help her. She was a stranger to him and no one, and even though it hurt to think about it, she could only imagine the pain he must have gone through to become that. But she still loved him because he was her brother. Then she did something that no one could believe. She was angry that his blade had cut off her clothes and hated how helpless she felt, so she slashed at him. He was the one who had been making sure she didn't get hurt during what was supposed to be a friendly spar. Her chains, the Uzumaki clan's chains, had drawn the blood of relatives. Just that wasn't enough. She had tried to go further and use all of her skills to completely crush him, but he had stopped her. He, who hadn't even learned how to use those chains from their mother, called forth his own and completely stopped her attack. This showed a level of mastery that she could never hope to reach. Then she made her last mistake, which stood out like a million suns next to a dying ember at noon. She had tried to hurt her brother with the chakra of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Mito, who was herself a Kyuubi, made a deal with her that in exchange for that power, she would reunite the ancient Biju with her brother. She should have known from that alone that she couldn't use that power against him. Even though she was angry, she tried. The pain she felt then wasn't as bad as the guilt she felt later. But she didn't let her guilt stop her from talking to the Biju about it. Even that was wrong. When she first met Mito, she was so desperate to get back in touch with her brother that she seemed more like a heartbroken widow than a being who could do a lot of damage. Somehow, the Biju knew her brother and had been linked to him at one point, but they were no longer together. She had never asked or asked why, which might have been another mistake on her part. It was clear that the ancient being cared a lot about her brother, so when she tried to use their power against him, she not only made them angry but also made it harder for her to keep her end of the deal. She would never forget how her ancestor's beautiful face showed pure rage and pure evil as it sneered down at her with disdain. Her first words were the ones that hurt the most. "You're not going to hurt him." But those that followed hurt just as much. "Even if you got stronger than him, he would still be better than you. You and your mother have already taken him down, so you won't do it again." She felt guilty when she heard those words, as if she had hurt Naruto too, but her anger at her prison pushed that feeling deep down. Naruto couldn't blame her for that, because she was also mad at herself. Even though she was upset that the Kyuubi wasn't helping her control her power anymore, she couldn't blame her for that. After all, she had tried to use it on the Mito, who was very important to her, which was terrible. At least she wasn't totally forbidden from using it, so their deal was still good. If she could get Mito back to her brother, everyone would be happy. At least, that's what she hoped. "Naruto-chan." Haku's soft voice was easy to recognize, and she turned to her friend with a smile, putting her thoughts on hold for a moment. She also saw wolves in the area turn to look. She didn't know if it was because she was interested, because they knew her brother, or because Haku was the apprentice of a missing ninja as well known as Zabuza. "Haku, I thought you and Zabuza would have left a long time ago." Haku gave a nod and shook his head. "I was about to leave. Zabuza has already started, but his injuries are still slowing him down, so I should be able to catch up to him long before he gets to the border." "Oh, well, I hope he gets better, because I know how much you care about him." "Yes, but you're important to me, too, and I wanted to be able to say goodbye." Naruto smiled at him again. "I value you too, Haku, because I don't have many friends." The ice user seemed a little sad about what she said, but Naruto couldn't figure out why. "I also wanted to thank you again for saving him. I hope your sensei wasn't too hard on you for that." "Don't worry," Naruto told the worry. "Kakashi sensei is pretty chill. He just shrugged, told me not to do it again, and then told me my brother would have found a better way." "Do you have a sibling?" "Oh, yeah," she said. Haku could tell that the subject made her feel bad, so he apologized. "I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be nosy." She told him, "It's fine. There are problems in our family right now, but I hope we can solve them soon." "I see," Haku said. It was clear he wanted to ask more, but they moved on. "Anyway, I really should go. Zabuza shouldn't be traveling right now, especially not alone." "Oh well, Haku, maybe we'll meet again someday." "Yeah, I'd like that," Naruto said. Before she knew it, someone's lips were on hers. Just as quickly, they were gone, leaving her to stare in shock at Haku's soft smile. "Sorry, I just wanted to try it one more time." Her mind was having trouble making sense of what had just happened, but she did admit that she could have been kissed by much less attractive boys. She hadn't really met that many young men that she could call pretty. As Haku was getting ready to leave, they stopped for a moment and looked back at Naruto, who was still shocked. "Oh, and by the way, I'm a girl." "Eh?" Haku left with nothing but soft, tinkling laughter, leaving behind a blushing Naruto. The small waves crashed softly against the shore of a country with the same name as the waves. In the late morning, as the sun warmed the land and drove away the last bits of fog from the morning, the ocean breeze was nice. Sasuke sat on the wooden pier outside the house of Tazuna the bridge builder and swung his leg just a few centimeters above the water. He had one knee pulled up to his chest. If the wind got any stronger, he was sure his foot would get wet. This didn't bother him, though, because his mind was on something else. Actually, it wasn't as far away as he might have liked because one of his teammates was in a nearby town. Since he saw how powerful she was, Sasuke couldn't think of much else. This wasn't about how he could get the same kind of power as she did, but about how she used it. It didn't look easy for her to call on or control, and every second she used it seemed to hurt her a lot, but as soon as she realized who was behind the mask, all that power and the feeling of unbridled rage that had filled the air vanished completely. Why would she stop if she was really that desperate for the power and willing to suffer through it? After that, why couldn't she see that it was all for nothing? And for an enemy? But at the same time, she had not changed into that amazing form to protect her teammate, had she? Sasuke knew that he was the biggest weakness in that battle because his Sharingan had just come to life and was draining him too quickly to be as useful as they should have been. This hurt his pride, but he was more concerned with Naruto's strange behavior. He had always thought that other people made you weak, and he could use the fact that just knowing who their opponent was made Naruto give up her power. However, she ended up using that power for other people. Was it really not as important as he thought? Maybe it had nothing to do with anything. Did power, real power, come from somewhere else that didn't care how many people you were with or how few? Then there was the fact that she stopped Kakashi from killing Zabuza. Even though she didn't completely stop the attack, wasn't it power enough that she could choose who lived and who died? In the end, his thoughts didn't help him at all, and he didn't understand Uzumaki Naruto any better. But it didn't matter because he still had a lot of time. He didn't say anything when he felt his apprentice take their place behind him. He also didn't say anything about the happy smile on her face when he gave her a quick look. But it was a good thing that she was happy, because things didn't look good for them in the near future. Even though he was feeling better, it would take him a long time to get back to where he was before this horrible mission. It didn't help at all that none of it mattered in the end. He was lucky that the wolves hadn't tried to kill him, since his boss was dead and the mansion had been blown up. He only let himself heal for as long as he had to, so he could get the hell out of there as soon as he could. He didn't know if Wave would stay like this or change back once the Konoha team was gone, and he didn't want to find out. They had traveled a long way to get here, and they didn't have much left, but they should be able to get back to Mizu no Kuni and find Mei. She would need to know about the wolves who had taken over the port nation, especially if she planned to hire their services in the future. Gato, being the little shit he was, wasn't the best person, but he was still their boss. At the very least, that was something to watch out for in the future. I hope you had fun, Haku, he finally said in a rough voice, because it will be hard to explain this to Mei. Her soft voice was the next thing she did after a small giggle. Oh, yes, I'm glad I took the chance to steal another kiss from Naruto-chan then, because it might be the last. He stopped himself from putting his face in his hand. I guess at least one of us got something good out of this. If only he could have gotten his hands on some of Gato's money or kissed Mei to make her feel better. Zabuza wasn't so lucky, though. A group of villagers had come to get rid of the Konoha shinobi who had been protecting their bridge builder and given the wolves the chance to attack Gato. Sakura gave a light smile to everyone who wished them well and had a blush on her cheeks, which made her feel bad. Sasuke didn't say or do anything, but instead of his usual scowl, he had a thoughtful frown on his face. Even though it wasn't a big difference, his team could tell. Naruto had a bright smile on her face, even though she was still a little uneasy about leaving these people, quite literally, to the wolves. Kakashi's mask didn't hide the smirk of happiness on his face. One hand was on his open copy of Icha Icha, and the other was in his pocket, where he was idly touching the pants that Tsunami had stuffed in there after a night of partying. Or maybe it was a reward for a good job. He didn't remember what reason she gave him, and he didn't think she did either. At the end of the day, they both knew it was just a way to have some fun. When the team had some free time, they might come back to visit, just for old time's sake. Also, he wanted to hit it again so badly. By all the gods, that almost made me want to go missing Nin. The finished bridge, which had no name and was ready for them to cross, was spread out behind them. Tazuna was at the front of the group waiting to see them off. He had just finished building the bridge and was in charge of the group. Team 7 was supposed to cross it first, or at least that was the plan. As soon as Tazuna's eyes got bigger, Kakashi turned around and took a kunai from his leg instead of the pants in his pocket. The scarf wrapped around the first person's lower face and the hood of their travel coat pulled over their head were enough to hide them. Since the cloak was left open, it was easy to see that the person was wearing a tight gray shirt and black cargo pants. A small bag was resting on the small of their back and could just be seen. On top of that bag was a knife that was all wrapped up. It wouldn't be easy to do in battle, but he was used to seeing snarling wolf masks all around him, so it didn't seem like much a problem. They didn't think twice about crossing the bridge with their guards following behind, and when they got to the other side, they didn't stop. Instead, they went to meet a group of wolves who were coming from the direction of the village. As soon as the High Captain stopped in front of the cloaked figure and gave the Konoha salute, it was clear who he was. He wore a white fur mantle. Behind the figure in the cloak, a wolf in a bright red mantle waved off the High Captain and gave orders that those close by couldn't hear. With just a nod, the High Captain led away the figure in the cloak and the other wolf, who was definitely a leader. The three genin kept a close eye on the newcomers, and the villagers seemed to be on guard. As if they hadn't just walked in like they owned the place, which, given their company, they might have. The figure in the cloak followed them, only looking back at Team 7 once. Kakashi was sure that there were 2 amethyst orbs hidden in the shadows of their hood. Sensei, no. Kakashi said before Naruto could finish her question. This is no longer important to us, so let's go back to Konoha. Even though it could have been a coincidence that they came from that direction, since that was the only bridge in the area and there were wolves in Wave who could have told them, that was also the direction of Konohagakure no Sato. Kakashi was pretty sure that these were the wolves that the Yamanaka had said existed because of how they greeted him. The same wolves with whom Naruto seemed to hang out. That might or might not be him, Kakashi said. It's also possible that he's just a show of power. They could have the support of a noble family that wanted Wave and be acting in their best interests. Sakura stared at the figure and asked, so you don't think that's Tsukiyomi? No, it's probably not. What I mean is that they might not be at the top, but even if they are, we're done here. What happens next is out of our control. Sakura nodded in understanding. Sasuke looked away from the group with a frown and started walking down the bridge toward their village. Sakura ran after him. Naruto also frowned. She didn't want to leave this town in the hands of people she didn't know, but she gave in and moved to join her friends. Kakashi smiled when he looked back at the people of Wave. We're glad we could help, and you can count on us to stop by when we can. We'd love to see what Wave can become now that Gado no longer has control over it. The villagers knew that their silent promise that they'd come back to check on the village was clear, and they were thankful for that. No one was more excited than Tsunami, who ran up to Kakashi and slammed her lips against his mask. Oh, they would come back for sure. It was good to be Kakashi. The first thing he noticed about the small town was the sea breeze, which was a nice change from the forests of Konoha. The size was the second thing. This country was so small, but it had the potential to be one of the richest in the world. Once everyone was settled in, he would have to figure out how to make this small town into something bigger. He might be able to give refuge to clans that were having trouble. That would not only make the town grow quickly, but it would also give the wolves more people to train. Wave wasn't quite ready yet, so that would have to wait. The High Captain led them through the village and into the nearby woods. Then he told them to turn around and go to Gado's house. After walking around a large, burned-out clearing that was clearly made by people, they were almost to the 2-story mansion that Gado was so proud of. Several wolves stood guard around the perimeter. When they saw who was coming, they saluted right away. As Naruto stepped onto the grounds, he had to agree that the man had done a good job. The simple gardens were easy to take care of and set the mansion apart from the land around it. The mansion was built with a good balance between how it looks and how it works. This was definitely going to be a fortress if things went wrong, and a palace if everything went well. Gato was not in his fortress when things went wrong, which was bad for him. As he walked through the wooden doors, he was impressed to see that each door to the grand entryway was made of 2 fine wood doors with a large metal plate in the middle. If the man had only been dealing with regular people and thieves, he would have almost certainly been successful. Of course, everything changed when Shinobi joined the group. He would say, though, that even an experienced genin would have had trouble getting into the building because it didn't look as strong as it was. The mansion was a nice lie, but he was willing to bet that it was more about making the place nice to look at and live in than making people think the defenses were weak. In either case, kudos to the person who made the place. And, he thought, Gato was smart to hire them. When the doors were closed behind them and the wolves were in place to protect them, Naruto took off his hood and scarf and gave his High Captain a happy smile. Well done, High Captain Keigo, you've done the pack proud. Thank you, Tsukiyomi-sama. Keigo moved into the Konoha salute at the praise, and the man's happiness at having pleased their leader was almost palpable. No need to thank me, High Captain. The pack thanks you. I wanted Wave, and you gave it to me. Now we finally have a place to call our own. The High Captain was just a little taller than the others. His study has everything we need, right? Yes, Tsukiyomi-sama. Then you're free for the rest of the day. You can do what you want with it. He gave one last salute and left, and Naruto went up the grand staircase to the 2nd floor. Gato had probably spent enough money on this place to run a small country for a few years. Oh, yes. Surely, a businessman would do something like that, right? No matter what, it was his now, and Gato's money would take care of the people. Or, they would keep doing it for a while. He would leave them alone as soon as they could take care of themselves. He knew why Gato was drinking up all the water, but it wasn't the best thing to do. With a fair tax and the right security measures in place to make sure no one messed with his country, he could still make a lot of money off of the people of Wave. People would have stayed longer, but he could have just as easily started buying up people's land until everyone had to leave. There was nothing anyone could have done to stop that. Well, too bad for him. The office was easy to find because it was the room right at the top of the stairs. When you opened the door, you saw that the room had been torn apart. He only had to take a quick look to see that there were 3 different safes hidden around the room. 2 of them were in the walls, and 1 was under the floor. Gado's desk had been moved to a corner of the room that hadn't been touched, or at least hadn't been put back together too badly. It was covered with stacks of papers, and the boxes around it held more. On top of one of the boxes was a plain sealing scroll that no doubt held the valuables that were hidden in the safes that were found. Naruto was happy, so he carefully walked across the broken floor to the desk to see what they had for him. He wouldn't even try to get through it all this trip, or maybe ever. He was glad that Sai would have to deal with it all. To look after. A lot of it would come back to Mai, and he would have to deal with a lot of it again, but that was better than having to go through it all. The Hokage really should have thought about hiring a few more secretaries or even an entire administrative team to help him with his paperwork. Since Konoha seemed to make so much money, though no one could figure out why, it seemed about right. On the other hand, he could look through every piece of paper filled out for the village if he wanted to. He might have done it for fun. As I looked through the papers, it was clear that most of them were about money and were probably only kept as records. That also meant that it was unlikely to have anything illegal in it, so Naruto didn't really need it. It made it useless for all of them, in fact. He would have to find someone else to run Wave's business, since Sai was terrible with money and Mai already had a lot to do. He stopped for a moment when he thought about that. He could use at least one clan from Konoha and a large part of another. Setting up some Hyuga here would be good, and so would giving them a position where they could have some control. However, as long as Hinata was in Konoha, it might be hard to do this without people getting suspicious. Most of the time, Hinata's followers didn't notice anything odd. So, only the Inuzuka were left, and they had much more freedom to serve. On the other hand, they weren't thought to be the smartest people. They were much more rash and impulsive than what would be expected of them here. The main family, on the other hand, said they knew more, which they would need to do to run their clan. If that was true, they might be exactly what he needed. Inuzuka Kiba, the youngest, wouldn't be any help. He didn't seem to be as smart as the main family, or if he was, he didn't show it. Instead, he was as rude as his cousins within the clan. Sume, the head, was a good choice, but it would be hard for her to leave her clan for long periods of time to run business in Wave, and he was pretty sure that a lot of her time was already taken up by running the clan. She did have a daughter, though, if he remembered right. That might work, that most likely would work. Dealing with business in Wave could be seen as good training for running the clan, and giving her such a high position would help the Inuzuka and wolves get along better. It might be hard to get them to send their heiress with them to Wave, but they wouldn't mind if an Inuzuka guard was stationed here to make sure this wasn't a complicated plan to kidnap her. Obviously, if she ended up dating one of the wolves or, better yet, Sai during her stay, the ties between her clan and Sai's wolves would only get stronger. Assuming, of course, that they don't have a messy breakup, which could really set things back between the clans. Naruto thought to himself that business relationships seemed overly complicated, even though they should be very easy. Even if the heiress's relationship turned into a nightmare, her guard might end up in a relationship, which would make their bonds stronger. Since Sai was the best option, it seemed like a good bet. Well, it doesn't matter. If it happened, he'd deal with it then. For now, he'd have to talk to Sume through Mai and suggest the plan. First, maybe some gifts from Wave and a place for the heiress to live while she was here. They would also need a place for the wolves so that a daimyo could live in Gado's mansion. He still hadn't decided if that would belong to that daimyo permanently or just be used when other daimyo came to visit. Shaking his head, he quickly scribbled down his idea and put it in a pocket before writing a more formal, but still not very long, note. Come, Sai, we have one last thing to do before we start working. Without saying a word, Sai fell behind Naruto and followed him out into the gardens. He found a place to stand where he could get direct sunlight from Wave's usually cloudy sky. He took his amulet out from under his shirt and made sure the sun hit the golden coils. After cutting his thumb on a kunai, he rubbed a lot of blood around the amulet of until the golden light of the sun that it reflected turned red. In a small flash of the same red light, a golden snake about the length of Naruto's arm coiled itself up on the ground in front of him. It said to him, "High Priest. Child of A," he said in response. "I need your help. Will you give it to me?" Of course. What do you want to know? He showed the snake the rolled up paper and said, "This is the message. I want it to be given to the person who has the snake contract." The snake gave a nod. "Give it to me," the message said. "It will happen." As soon as the paper was put in front of the snake, it struck out, grabbed it in its mouth, and vanished in a red flash. He smiled and lightly touched his amulet with a clean finger, noting with some amusement that the blood that had covered it was gone. This might have been the most useful thing Orochimaru had sent him so far. When he finally met them, he would have to thank them. When he talked about being grateful, he looked at the sun, which was hidden behind a softly moving cloud, and whispered, "Thank you, A's child." Even though the sun was hidden behind clouds, he thought the amulet briefly lit up when he spoke. As she walked through the town she had lived in her whole life, there was no sign on her face that she was nervous. She had a soft smile on her face, and she replied happily to every greeting. People were doing much better than they ever had when Gato was in charge. She almost didn't dare to hope, but it looked like things might turn out even better than they were before Gato came. She couldn't hope so foolishly that it would happen anymore after the last few years. If it did, they were lucky, but she wouldn't hope for it. From her point of view, this was as good as it was going to get. Still, the fact that it was an obvious improvement kept that small smile on her face. Even though she didn't have much hope and thought this was the best that could happen, she was still glad that the wolves had changed the country where she was born. When she looked up from where she was, she saw grouching wolves who watched everything like the eyes of a god who was always there. From the point of view of some of the characters in Nami no Kuni, they were. Their leader thought it was okay for them to call themselves Tsukiyomi, which is the name of the god of the moon. Most of Wave knew it was a silly idea, but no one tried to change the minds of the few who thought it was true. If that's what they wanted and what they needed, then they could have their god. Tsukiyomi had not said whether he liked it or didn't like it, and the wolves' different reactions were mostly based on appreciation and laughter. It looks like even they didn't all agree that their leader was a god. She double-checked the bundle of cloth in her hands to make sure it was still there. She couldn't believe she was about to do this just because the lazy pervert had asked her to. He had said that if this Tsukiyomi was the person he thought she was, she and her family would be in a good position because of this, but even if they weren't, the item itself would probably be a good enough gift to get them to like him anyway. Of course, as soon as he said that and gave her the item, he took one last feel of her rear end before giving her a quick, covered kiss on the lips and leaving to join his genin team, who had already started their way back to Hai no Kuni and Konohagakure no Sato. The fact that that damned pervert couldn't keep his hands to himself was sometimes annoying and sometimes nice. She knew she was pretty, but it was nice to hear it from someone else. Still, it kept that thought at the front of her mind as she tried to finish this task. During Gato's rule, it was no secret that the wolves were happy to give money to families in exchange for their wives and daughters. However, now that Gato was gone, there didn't seem to be any sign that those women might be coming back. Even if someone could find the money that the woman was originally sold for, the wolves didn't seem very interested in buying her back. There was also the fact that no one knew what had happened to those women. Were they just kept in a safe place? Were they cooking and cleaning for the wolves as part of their job? Had they been sold for more money to other slavers? Maybe they were given to Tsukiyomi as a gift when he got there, or maybe they used them the same way Gato's forces would have, raping them until they were satisfied with their most basic needs. There was no way to know for sure without talking to one of those women, and even then, they might not have been willing to talk about what they had been through. Most people agreed, though, that they were probably better off with the wolves than with Gato. It was wishful thinking, or at least that's what she thought, but there was some truth to it. Even if they did the same thing, the wolves had always been nicer to the people of Wave than Gato's men had been. They didn't know what the wolves would do with the woman, but Gato and his men would be clear about what they were doing. Both did the same job, but people liked dealing with the wolves much more. That hope was that would stay with the women when they got their hands on them. If you really think about it, the only real way to find out how the wolves treated their guests is if a woman went missing before they got there. Since they had been Gato's guests before the wolves took them, they were the only ones who could accurately describe what the wives and daughters were going through now. Even though all of those women had been fairly bought, it didn't make her feel any better as a pretty woman who wanted to meet with their leader. The plain blouse and worn-out skirt didn't stand out in any way, but they fit her well enough to show off her womanly curves, which was a lot more advertising than she would have liked. She knew it was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it could help persuade the wolves to let her talk to their leader, but on the other hand, she might not come back. She could already feel the silent guardians of Nami no Kuni looking at her, and their sneering faces seemed to turn into lecherous leers. It was probably her imagination, and the wolves probably weren't looking at her like she was a piece of meat, but it felt that way. She might be lucky enough to get there before the person who said they were Tsukiyomi. If she did, the gift she gave him might make him happy enough to let her go. If the wolves took her now and she never met the man, she wouldn't have that chance. She wasn't comforted by the idea that she was safer at the mercy of the Alpha and his whims when his wolves had already shown the forces of Gado how powerful and cruel they could be. But it gave her plenty of reason to hurry to get there before him. When she left the village streets and went to the clearings around it, the wolves started to pay even more attention to her. That wasn't a surprise, since she was on her way to Gado's old house. Kakashi told her that even if the mansion really was destroyed, there was no way in hell that the wolves hadn't gone through it and taken anything valuable. He had said that shinobi were by nature opportunistic jerks. This was likely a reference to the fact that he had slept with her when she showed interest, and the wolves were definitely shinobi in every way. At the very least, they were camping in this direction, which was made clear when two wolves jumped down from trees just a little further into the forest and stopped her from going any further. She put the bundle of cloth on the ground and raised her hands in front of her without being told to. She then took one step back from the bundle. Wolves live in these woods, so what are you doing here, daughter of the bridge builder? She kept her voice as even and calm as possible as she said, I have a gift. For Tsukiyomi-sama. The first wolf didn't look away from her, but the second wolf did look down at the bundle of cloth. The second one asked, and your gift is inside there? That's right, she said with a nod. Before the second one came up, the two wolves looked at each other briefly. She moved back with each step they took to give them room. When they finally got to the bundle, they didn't hesitate to get on their knees and check it out, ignoring her completely. She couldn't see why anyone would think she was a big threat, so she could understand why they did. They dug through the cloth until they could see what was inside, but they didn't take the items out. After a moment of looking at it, they turned and looked at her, then back at their partner. They picked up the bundle and took it back to the edge of the woods, where the first wolf was waiting. After a quick look, the first one gave a nod, and the second one walked back and gave it to her. The first person said, very well. We'll take you to Tsukiyomi-sama to give this gift to him, they said after a short pause. Where did you get it? Kakashi-san from Team 7 in Konoha gave it to me because he thought Tsukiyomi-sama would like it. I think Tsukiyomi-sama will approve. Come, stay close to us. If you go off our path, you will be killed. As if to emphasize this, more wolves fell from the trees, showing that wolves did live in these woods. Of course, she said, nodding more to reassure herself than to reassure them. Then she walked up to the first wolf and stood there. He turned and didn't say anything else, so she knew she should follow. As soon as she stepped into the line of trees, the second wolf followed her. Logically, he should have been watching her in case she did something, but a part of her still thought he was behind her so he could look at her behind. She only knew she was right when she heard someone whisper, damn, behind her. Kakashi had said pretty much the same thing, but her pride liked hearing it again. Now, all she could do was hope that wouldn't hurt her when it was time to leave. Aside from seeing a few wolves here and there, the trip was pretty boring until they came to a big clearing with broken trees and ash. There had been some kind of explosion here, and she was smart enough to figure out that this must have been the explosion they had all seen from the bridge. Most of them thought that Gado's house had caught fire, but they had to keep in mind that they were shinobi. She had to agree that it was a good idea when she saw how happy the people of Nami no Kuni were to think that Gado was gone for good. Not only did they win over the people of the country they were trying to take over, but they also got to keep what must be a very expensive mansion. Everyone knew that Gado liked to live in style, so his mansion had to be the best he could buy with his money. Shinobi were always looking for opportunities, just like Kakashi had said, and she liked how they had used this one to their advantage. Not far from the one that had been made by humans, there was one that looked much more natural. Here is where Gado built himself a palace, and the wolves were happy to make this palace their new home. She was led through the grounds of the mansion and into the building, where she was told to wait just inside the doors. The first wolf left the room, most likely to find his master and tell him that she was there. The second wolf, on the other hand, seemed happy to just stand behind her. Of course, from a good distance. He couldn't enjoy the view any other way. She turned around to look over her shoulder because she could see that he was staring. Sit down, boy. She said it with a lot more confidence than she felt at the time, but his response helped a little. Yes, of course, ma'am, I'm sorry," stammered the wolf, who looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Don't do it again, that's all. I'll try not to, ma'am, but what you want will be hard to do." She winked at him. "Oh, I get it. Evil woman," he growled under his breath just loud enough for her to hear. She just gave a soft laugh, which made him behind her groan in surprise. "I swear you'd get along great with the women Tsukiyomi-sama hangs out with. I know you're not a kunoichi, but maybe you'd think about joining the wolves?" "Oh, and what would a beautiful civilian woman like me be doing in an organization like this? I'm a mother, you know. I have a child to take care of. I'm sure I could talk one of the higher-ups into giving you an administrative job, preferably one that requires you to move around a lot. I'm sure that would be good for you, I and a lot of others. Let's not get your hopes up. I'll think about it. You just made my day, ma'am." She let out a soft laugh again. She was much less tense than when she first walked into the wolves' new den. "I thought I did that already. Was it, damn, did you hear that?" "Oh, yes, I did that for sure." When the first wolf came back, they could no longer talk. "Tsukiyomi-sama is in the master bedroom right now. He told me to show you where he is." She started to feel nervous again, but thankfully not as much as before. She gave the wolf a silent nod and followed him back out of the room and to a set of heavy doors. "He's inside. Don't move around quickly, and if he tells you to do something, you should do it," he said. She was much more nervous than she had been at first, and she could feel a drop of sweat running down the back of her neck. "You're not coming in, are you?" He gave a head shake. "I have been told to go back to work after bringing you here." I see. Are there any more wolves inside?" he asked. Behind his mask, he looked at her with what could only be seen as suspicion, but he answered anyway. "No, we usually have guards for him, but he got rid of them when I told him about your visit. You and he will be alone in there, so I'll say it again. Don't move around quickly." "Why aren't there guards?" "Because he can still kill you from anywhere in that room before you can blink, and we won't be there to stop you if you try anyway, even if you don't want to." She wasn't sure if she should be flattered that they saw her as more than just a pretty face or annoyed that they treated her like she was a threat even though she was a housewife. "Okay, I can handle myself." He just gave a shrug. "One of you will," he told her, and then he left her standing in front of two doors. If you look down the hallway on both sides, you could see wolves lined up along the walls a few doors down. Even though they didn't look at her, she was sure she was being watched. After taking a deep breath and gathering her courage, she turned the door's handle and gently pushed on it. It opened easily and quietly, letting the light from the hallway into the much darker room. Gas lamps burned dimly along the walls, but they didn't do much to get rid of the dark corners. The man who called himself the God of the Moon had drawn dark curtains over the large windows that took up most of the wall across from the door. This kept most of the early afternoon sun from coming into his room. Another lamp sat on an empty desk, barely brighter than the others. A twin sat on a nightstand by the large four-poster bed. The man she wanted to talk to was sitting on the edge of that bed. There were boxes of paper at his feet, and one of them had fallen onto the bed. He didn't look up when she came in. Instead, his eyes moved over the papers he was holding in one hand. However, his voice broke the quiet of his sanctuary. "Come in then, there's no reason to stand in the hall," he told her. When she did, he went on. "And the door, please. My first office didn't have windows, and it's been hard for me to focus on work when it's brighter." "Oh, my bad." One hand moved to show that she wasn't sorry. "It's okay. I'm the one who asked for you to be brought here," he said, tossing the papers onto his bed and looking up at her with purple eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light and skin that seemed to glow. "Now, Tsunami-san, what can I do for you today?" She put a hand to her mouth right away to hold back a gasp. First, it was because he looked different in the dark room, and then it was because he looked young. Even though she moved quickly, the young man didn't do anything to hurt her. "I brought you something that you might enjoy. A gift." "A gift," she said again. She slowly moved to the edge of the bed to give him the bundle, but he pulled her down onto the bed and sat her down next to him. Once she was in the right place, he took the bundle of cloth out of her hands and took out the thing that was inside. He looked down at it with a fond smile, and the face of a crow looked back at him. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Where did you get this?" "Just before he and his team left for Konoha, Kakashi-san gave it to me. He said that if you were who he thought you were, you would appreciate it." He gave a small laugh. "Ah, good old Inu. He's right, I do appreciate it, and I'm sure Makoto-chan will, too. She didn't know who Makoto was, but it was clear that Inu had something to do with Kakashi. She thought it was strange that they knew each other, and she almost asked. Tsukiyomi, however, asked his own question before she could. So, I guess that means you must be close to Kakashi? Well, she said, and someone put up a hand to stop her. I get it, he said, and his purple eyes went up and down her body, following every inch of her shape. I can see why he liked you, Tsunami-san, because you're a pretty woman. Even though she didn't want it, she had a hint of pink on her cheeks. Many thanks. No, thank you. I'm happy to have this, and anyone who is friends with Kakashi is a friend of my wolves. If you need help, just call on us. Was there anything else I could do for you, Tsunami-san? The woman gave it some thought. Well, one of the wolves I met today did say something about the possibility of an office job, and as Inari gets older, I'm finding that I have more and more time on my hands. It wouldn't hurt to have another source of income. He gave her a smile that fit the name of his army very well. I'll look into it. When the lapdog of the main family said, Hanabi-sama, the Hyuga heiress stopped walking and looked over her shoulder to see who was calling her. So, Neji, this means you've found something, right? The boy gave a small bow. Yes, Hanabi-sama. It's taken you long enough. Come, let's talk about it in my office. Of course, Hanabi-sama. She was already going to her room, so it didn't take long for the two of them to get there. Taking a moment to look around with her Byakugan, she was sure that no one would see the two of them enter her chambers. If the branch members thought that the two of them knew what the Hyuga clan was doing behind the scenes, that would be bad, but rumors that the two of them were working together would be even worse. Her room was one of the few places where the Byakugan couldn't get in, so they wouldn't be watched once they were inside. She kept watch while her cousin went in first. She went after him as soon as she realized that anyone entering Byakugan range would only see her going into her room and not question it. So, she said. She crossed her arms over her chest and tried hard to look down on him, which was hard to do because they were different ages and heights. If it weren't for the seal on his forehead, he would be able to beat her in a fight by a huge margin. This made her very angry and frustrated, but it also made her very happy because she could still control him. What do you know now? Yesterday, I saw a group of branch members leave a sightless room. The name came from the fact that the Byakugan couldn't see through it, but given the beliefs of the clan, it's also surprising that they weren't called fateless rooms. The fact that they were used as living quarters by the main family was a pretty good reason for that. I expected a main family member to leave after them, since it's not unusual for an elder or main family member to bring branch members into them for different reasons. All of these reasons were left unsaid, but they were all different. People in Konoha couldn't be told what was going on inside the clan. To my surprise, there was no main member, but Hinata-san left the room after the others, followed by a guard in a wolf mask who quickly disappeared. That was interesting to her. A wolf mask? That was way more important than anything he was saying at the time. Her father told her that Naruto, a boy who used to be a member of the Uzumaki clan, was the Yamanaka clan's enemy. He used the boy as an example of someone who wasn't very strong but had powerful allies. The fact that the Yamanaka were quickly brought to their knees proved that Naruto did have powerful allies. And since the Yamanaka said it was a group of unknown people in wolf masks, not the boy without a clan, who were breaking up their group, it was clear that these wolves were working with the academy student who had been in her sister's class. Now, those same wolves were watching over her sister while she met with different branch members in rooms where they couldn't see each other. Already, things didn't look good at all. Even though the Hyuga were much stronger than the Yamanaka, the wolves were almost too strong for the Mindwalker clan. If they could join the Hyuga clan, it wouldn't matter how strong they were. It looks like they had more than just a way in. They also had help. That last fact didn't really surprise her much. Most of the branch family would love to see the main family fall, and since Hinata knew more about the main family than the branch family members who were helping her, they were very easy prey for these wolves. They were about to get eaten. She could already feel beads of sweat on the back of her neck. It could just be a coincidence, but fate never uses coincidences unless they serve a purpose. It was clear that the clan was going to change. Whether or not the branch members wanted to take over the clan, they were going to act soon, and the fact that they thought they could do so even though they had seals on their heads was not a good sign for the main family. No matter what was going on, fate was sending a clear message. She had to get away. Yes, Hanabi-sama, it's a wolf mask, her cousin said, not knowing what was going through her mind or what was making her feel uneasy. I see, continue. Remembering where I was, I woke up early this morning and sat down in a nearby garden to wait with my Byakugan. Just like the day before, Hinata-san and many other branch members soon came into the room. He paused, feeling a little uneasy. I need to point out that the branch family members who followed her are well liked and have a lot of influence over the rest of the branch family. Whatever they are doing isn't isolated or won't be for long. When they started leaving the meeting again a few hours later, I moved closer in case I could hear something. Unfortunately, I only heard one thing before someone else shut the speaker up. What did you hear, then? He stopped for a moment and took a deep breath. They were talking about Hinata-san. They called her, Hinata no Makoto. What? It came out more like a hiss than a hyuga of her rank should have, but she didn't care. A goddess? They think she is divine? Things kept getting worse. If they really thought she was a goddess, they would never submit to the main family again. A bloodbath was inevitable, and she wasn't so stupid as to think that only the branch members would die. Hinata was thought to be divine and had something to do with the wolves, who had brought down the Yamanaka clan. The Hyuga clan, as they knew it, was going to fall no matter what, and the only question was who would have to rebuild it. The winners, yes, but with help from outside and many more people on their side, it looked like the winners might be the branch family led by her sister. She could talk to her father and the elders about this, and she should, but that might tip off the branch members and bring things to a head before they were ready. It might give the main family a much-needed advantage, but even if they won, there wouldn't be many or any branch members left in the clan. Her father had taught her that the Hyuga couldn't survive without the branch family. They were very important, so it was actually in the best interest of the Hyuga clan for the branch family to do well. However, as the heiress of the main family, she stood in the way of that happening, which was not a good place to be. But she knew what was coming and had time to get ready, so fate must have other plans for her. She had to make sure she was available to play any roles that came up. She had to get out. That's good, Neji. Keep an eye on them, but don't get caught or tell the elders or my father about any of this. I'll take care of things, so there's no need to bother them with this. On your order, Hanabi-sama, he said. He made a small bow, but she waved him off. You are sent away. She should have left the room to see if anyone saw him leave, but she couldn't do it. When he left, she fell back against the wall and slid to the floor, holding her head in her hands. How was she going to get out of this mess? She turned around quickly when she felt someone behind her, and it was only at the last second that she didn't throw the kunai she was holding. Oh. What's going on? When she built her outposts, security was one of her top priorities, and she knew that no animal could ever hope to get through. The fact that it suddenly appeared, when she would have seen it earlier if it had been there, made her wonder why she was looking at the golden scales of a serpent. There was one answer that came to mind right away, one that made her painted lips smile. Then, a child of A. What are you doing here? As it looked up into her eyes, a roll of paper fell from its mouth. The high priest told me to give this to the person who holds the snake contract. You're her, right? Yes, that's me. What could my very special godson have sent me? I have nothing to say about it. I'm going to leave now. With a red flash, the snake was gone, leaving only the paper. She picked it up and tucked it into her shirt because she was curious about what her godson would send her. She couldn't wait to read it, but she was patient enough to go to her safe place so she could enjoy the first thing she had ever gotten from the boy. Even if he didn't know he was her godson and just wanted to get in touch with the person who held the snake contract, which wouldn't be surprising given the gift she sent him, it was still important to her. She hurried back to her rooms, her long legs eating up the distance between her and her godson's written word. With each step, her heartbeat sped up and her breathing became shallower, and despite her excitement, she felt a kind of nervousness that didn't fit her. Maybe he did figure out who his godparent was, but he didn't want anything to do with her. Could the fact that she was a traitor to his home have made him hate her? Did he think she was trying to lure him away from his home with gifts, so he told her to stop contacting him? Was he upset that she had sent spies to watch him? Was he upset that she never came to see him or that she didn't take him from Konoha when his mother left him there? She found herself biting her bottom lip out of nervousness. He could be writing to meet with her, thank her for the gifts, or even ask her to become his new mother. All of these things would be great, but they were all just as likely as the others, and she didn't know what to expect. Orochi, one of her subordinates, tried to get her attention, but all he got for his trouble was a kunai to the shoulder. No way. She hissed, never stopping her pace. She didn't care if the armies of the 5 biggest countries had joined forces and were banging on the door to her hideout. This was more important. When she got to her chambers, she went in quickly and locked the door behind her. She didn't want to be interrupted. There wasn't much light inside, but that was fine. Her eyes were used to the darkness after living there for years, and the few flickering torches gave her enough light. When she got to the bed, she threw her pillows away and crawled up against the headboard. She pulled her knees up to her chest, made a tight nest with her blankets, and took the parchment out of her shirt. Even though it was short, she opened it, read it, and smiled. Wave belongs to the wolves, and so do your snakes, Godfather. Even though she didn't know why she was annoyed that he called her Godfather, which, technically, she still was, it was clear that Naruto wasn't bothered by it. In fact, his invitation to his new country showed that he was pretty open to the fact that they weren't related by blood. By the gods, she was proud of that boy for being able to do that at such a young age. Even though the message was short, it told her a lot more than what the words said. He was obviously doing well, since he had just taken over a country and was able to offer her a place in it. He didn't seem to have anything against her, and the fact that he had also mentioned her own forces gave her hope that she could work with him one day. More than that, though, it gave her hope that he would fully accept her into his life, just like she wanted. Even though the message said more than what was written, that didn't mean she wouldn't have wanted to hear more from him. She would have been happy to hear about anything, from what he had for breakfast to his latest erotic dream. In fact, she'd really like to hear about such a dream or any fantasies he may have had. She could always use something else to do that had something to do with him or made her feel closer to him. The thoughts would be nice to read, especially on nights when she really missed him, but they would also give her a chance to try to set up situations that fit her fantasies. If she was really lucky, her next body might be chosen to fit them. Then again, was her current form even acceptable? She didn't know much about his tastes, at least not anything solid, and even if her current body matched them perfectly, would he be able to accept his godfather like this? Maybe she should have chosen a body that looked more like a man and helped him get used to the idea that his godfather was a woman. Instead, she might see him if she goes to Wave, and then he would have to deal with a godfather who is obviously a woman. There was no way to know if he'd be able to accept her as she was, even if he was okay with Orochimaru of the Sannin being his godfather. Knowing someone's true identity was one thing, but finding out about such a big change was quite another, especially since she wanted to be much closer to him than a godparent normally should be. Well, for any close friend or family member, really. In the end, she'd just have to accept that he was a little more open-minded than most people, or that his morals wouldn't stop him from being as close to her as she wanted. Both would be better, and she could already think of all sorts of deliciously immoral things they could do together. Aunt would work, and sister would work, too, but if I could get him to call me mother, Orochimaru shivered, even though she was wrapped in many blankets. Oh, the fun we could have, my little prince. She thought for a moment that sending him intimate pictures of her new form might help him accept her when they next saw each other, or at least give her an edge that she could use to convince him that the change could be good for both of them. But he wouldn't know who was in the pictures unless she told him, and even then he might not believe her until they met in person. But maybe she could find a way to persuade him to send her a few. As she wrote down his message, she licked her lips, and her free hand went under the blankets. She could already picture how much she would like them. She thought to herself that these meetings were much better when she was wearing pants. She could cross one leg over the other without worrying about putting on a show for her uninvited, but not necessarily unwanted, guests. Interestingly, the young woman who stood in for the one known as Tsukiyomi seemed more disappointed with her new clothes than the two men who stood behind her to protect her. Of course, that didn't mean she couldn't feel the eyes that drank in her form from behind their masks, and she couldn't say she blamed them. She was a beautiful woman, and her pants fit her lower body quite snugly. She'd have to make sure the laundry got done often enough so she had more options in the mornings, but since Kiba had graduated, she'd gotten used to being able to take advantage of the empty house and usually didn't get dressed until. What did it matter what she wore or didn't wear while she did paperwork in the privacy of her home office? The wolves, of course, messed up her plans. They didn't force her to wear pants, but she felt better when she met them wearing more than just her underwear and a bathrobe. So, she put on pants every morning before she had her first cup of coffee, something she hadn't done since before Kiba came to the academy, just in case she had unexpected guests. She didn't understand why they couldn't come later in the morning or, even better, in the afternoon. She tried not to think about how long they waited in her house while she slept through it. Hannah worked at the clan vet early in the morning, and Kiba met his team at 6, so they were probably here for at least 2 hours before she woke up. For a kunoichi like her, whether she was retired or not, that was an unsettling thought. She put her empty mug on the coffee table and rolled her eyes as 3 masks followed her every move. She tightened her bathrobe around her chest, which made the young woman in front of her very unhappy. Even though she started wearing pants, that didn't mean she had to get dressed before noon. It was her house, damn it, and if someone didn't like it, that was their damn problem. These wolves didn't seem to mind, though, and they would probably be fine if she started coming down naked. There weren't really that many people who wouldn't be. The woman was also very interested in her body, so it wouldn't be too surprising if she woke up one day to find all 3 of them in her bedroom. If that ever happened, she wasn't sure she'd be alone in her bed. Or, for that matter, dressed. But putting aside the female wolf's apparent sexual preferences, there was business to talk about. Or at least, that's what she thought. They hadn't made a social call to her house yet, and unless the young woman was planning to ask her out on a date, which was unlikely with the 2 standing behind her, unless they were some kind of package deal, this had to do with the packs. So, did you come to visit for a reason, or did you just want to see me again? Oh, Sume, you should know that just coming to see you is enough of a reason to come here. At the moment, though, it's just a nice bonus. Sume's cheeks were just a little bit pink. Since she spent most of her time doing paperwork, she didn't get compliments very often. It was nice for her ego to know that people still found her attractive. Even if those people were part of a secret group that was taking over countries and running a Hyuga cult, that wouldn't change anything. So, why did you want to talk to me? I'm going to get right to the point. Someone needs to run our new country. If she had any coffee left, she would have spit it out for sure. Already? They had just talked about speeding up the plan, so it was hard to believe that it was over and they already had control of the country. On the other hand, they had already taken down a clan from one of the 5 greater villages, which was arguably the best of the 5 greater villages, so how hard could it be for them to take control of a country with only civilians?
Yes, we can partly thank Team 7. Gato was in charge, but their mission gave them a chance to take it away from him. Wave is a member of the Wolves.
Wave? Damn. There were many small countries that were valuable because they made things that the larger countries needed or had skilled artisans. The Land of Hot Water, for example, made a lot of money from its resorts and natural hot springs. The amount of money that wealthy lords spent on vacations is hard to imagine. Wave, on the other hand, was just as hot as the Land of Hot Water, but it was almost completely undeveloped and only had a few hundred people living there. The location was perfect for trading, and even when Gato was in charge, it was one of the biggest trading hubs in the world. With the wolves in charge, there was no doubt that it would grow to a huge size and be in a class of its own.
Indeed. As I said, someone needs to be in charge of it. Commander Sai is in charge of the wolves in the area, but he is not the right person to be in charge of a small country. I have too much to do right now, and Tsukiyomi-sama needs to be free to take advantage of any other chances that come up.
I see. If you don't mind my asking, what is the exact order of things right now? Oh, I guess I should have said that in a previous meeting. The captains in charge of the wolves answer to a high captain. Commander Sai, who answers to me, is in charge of the high captains. I am in charge of both Commander Sai and the leader of our small cult, and it is my job to keep Tsukiyomi-sama up to date on what is going on in both groups.
That's an interesting way to set things up. How does my clan fit into all of that?
You should be flattered that Tsukiyomi-sama sees dealing with your clan as his personal duty. Obviously, he can't meet with you in person, but instead of letting me take charge like I do with the other 2 groups, I just tell you and your clan what Tsukiyomi-sama wants. She paused, and Sume could almost feel the frown that tugged at the mosque's lips. In fact, it's a bit more complicated than that now, given his latest request. Didn't he want someone to run his new country for him? I don't see how that has anything to do with our clan or with Tsukiyomi-sama, or San. I've been told that no is okay. You are, after all, working together. Many thanks. I don't know how this affects our relationship with Tsukiyomi Dono, as I said before.
Isn't that clear? He wants someone from your clan to run his country.
Yes, that was the obvious answer, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You've already said it, but we in Izuka are a pretty loud group. But didn't you say that the people in the head family know more than their cousins? Sume had to think for a moment before she figured out what the woman next to her was trying to say.
Hana. The wolf gave a nod. Correct. Tsukiyomi-sama thinks that she would do a good job as clan heiress, with the help of the wolves, and that it would be good training for when she takes over the clan.
And why not a Hyuga? They'd probably do a better job. Your clan is known for being loyal, and he wants to strengthen the bond between our packs by giving this position to your heiress. Not only that, but you wouldn't have to depend on the wolves alone for help because your daughter would be in charge of Nami no Kuni's day-to-day operations. It's a good idea, but I'd like to hear what she thinks about it first. Okay, that's fine. Should I send a wolf to get her? Please do. She didn't even have to send a wolf. As soon as the two women finished talking, one of the wolves went to find the Inuzuka heiress. Silence fell over the room. It wasn't a comfortable silence, but it wasn't a completely uncomfortable one, either. The two remaining wolves took this time to look at their hostess, and Sume knew what they were doing and tried not to blush. She said under her breath, "Gods above, you wolves are a dirty bunch." When the female wolf heard her, she cocked her head to the side and thought for a moment before giving a firm nod. She said, "I suppose we are, but it's more fun this way." I bet. She was sure that the girl was smiling behind her mask. Again, there was silence, but this time it was a little more comfortable. It wasn't long before she heard the door open, and she wondered why she hadn't heard anything when the wolf left, since he didn't have to sneak out of the house. Maybe he found a window that was open. No matter how the wolf left, he came back in behind her daughter as she and her mother went into the living room. "Ka-san? It's okay, Hannah. Sit down." She paused and frowned, then turned to her guest and said, "You know, I don't think you've ever given me a name to call you." "Oh. Sorry about that. You can call me Mai." Sume tasted it a few times on her tongue before she agreed.
Yes, well, Mai came here to ask for help from our clan. She had already told her daughter and the older members of the clan about their new alliance with the wolves, but she kept the details to herself, telling them only that the two groups would be working together for the good of both.
"And what does that have to do with me? You don't want to get me married, do you?" "No, absolutely not." On the other hand, Mai was quiet after she heard it. "Well, I'm sure Tsukiyomi-sama wouldn't mind too much. He might be a little annoyed with me if I set it up without him knowing, but I'm sure he'd forgive me soon enough." Mai paused and looked at the Inuzuka heiress with a look that was clearly aimed at her. "Especially since you're so pretty, I'm sure he'd go from being mad at me when I told him to being very happy after meeting you." Hannah didn't seem too happy about the idea, but a quick look at her mother put her mind at ease. The Inuzuka matriarch almost growled, "Mai," as a warning, but the young woman answered with a light giggle. "Oh, don't worry, I was just kidding. There are already plenty of options for him when he decides to think about it, and I'm sure more will come up between now and then. Even if there weren't, he's too busy for anything like that right now. Plus, if I set up something between Hannah and Tsukiyomi-sama, I lose my chance at her. She's just as pretty as you, Sume." At that, mom and daughter wore blushes that matched. Sume had to wonder if he should meet with Tsukiyomi or if he would be even worse than the young woman he sent to talk to them. "So, if this isn't about me getting married, why do I need to be here? Hannah, have you ever thought about being the leader of a country?" What kind of question was that? What? She couldn't be telling the truth when she said that her job was to run a small country, could she? The wolves just recently bought a country, and Tsukiyomi-sama wants you to run Nami no Kuni for him. "Do you want me to run Nami no Kuni? Are you kidding?" She turned to her mother and got a nod in response. "Yes, that's right. Tsukiyomi-sama thinks you would do well in such a position and that it would help you a lot when you take over the Inuzuka clan from your mother. So you think I should just drop everything and leave the country?" Yes. There was no hesitating, just the straight truth, and even though Hannah was a little annoyed, she was also glad for the honesty. She turned to her mom and asked, "How do you feel about this?" Sume replied, "I think it would be good for you. This is a great chance that could help you in the clan, so you should take it. If things don't work out, we can always figure out something else." Mai said, "There's a bridge builder there who oversaw the building of a bridge connecting Nami no Kuni to the eastern mainland. We could hire him and have High Captain Keigo stay there to help him manage Wave, but you'd be a better choice." "How soon do I have to leave?" "Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Tsukiyomi-sama is busy and has things to do outside of Nami no Kuni. You can't expect him to wait forever."
"I see. Do I have to go alone?" "No, of course not. You're welcome to bring a guard of your packmates with you. You'll all be taken care of. We haven't built a house for you yet, but the mansion we're staying in has plenty of space." "I'll do it if I can find enough people to go with me.
but if there aren't enough people to go with me tomorrow, you'll have to find someone else. Okay, that makes sense. Would you like a guide for the rest of the day? No, thank you, it's better for me to talk to them alone. I'll tell my mom by tonight, and she can tell you. Of course, I wish you the best of luck in getting your friends together. Have a nice day. Hannah left when she realized she was fired. Again, the two women who were still there were quiet for a while, since neither of them really had anything else to say.
At last, Mai's soft voice cut them off. Well, I think that's all the business for this morning. As always, soon, it was great to see you again.
Likewise, Mai. The woman with the wolf mask stopped for a moment as she looked at the Inuzuka matriarch in front of her. Sume-chan, say, the woman from Inuzuka raised an eyebrow. Chan, that was a first. Yes? Would you like to have lunch with me later? She blinked a few times in shock. Was this thing really going on? Like a date? Yes. As she thought about it, she let out a long sigh before giving a shrug. Yeah, sure, why not? Why the fuck not? She hadn't been out in a while, and the girl sounded cute. She had nothing to lose. Great, I'll pick you up around noon. Make sure you're wearing something nice. She paused again to think about what she had just said. Or just very little. Either way, I'd be happy. She waved and laughed as she walked away, leaving Sume to wonder once more. How did I get myself into this mess? Okay, team, you don't need to be here while I report. Go home. I'm sure you'd all love a hot shower and a night in your own beds. No one thought to ask if Kakashi's report would even be close to being true. The man had spent half of the trip talking about how great Tsunami's body was and the other half complaining that he didn't have Naruto on his team. He said that if Naruto had been on his team, they would have finished the mission a long time ago. None of the three genin would be too surprised if his report to the Hokage was mostly the same. The man's annoying habit was to only pay attention to what he thought was important and leave out everything else. Even so, this was probably a good thing for Naruto. She doubted the old Cage would be pleased to hear she hindered Kakashi's ability to execute an enemy. Maybe it was best for Kakashi to go back and tell the story in his own way. On top of that, that hot shower sounded great right now. The plumbing in Tezuna's house worked, but it cost too much to heat the water. To get back to Konoha, she had to take cold showers for 2 weeks and travel for 3 days. She couldn't think of anything else she'd rather be doing. Whether they agreed with her or just wanted to get away from their sensei, Sasuke left while still thinking, and Sakura didn't say a word as she followed him. If Sasuke told the Pinkette that she was thinking about a hot shower, she already knew what she was thinking. Now that they were gone, there wasn't much reason to stay around, especially in Kakashi's company, so she gave a half-hearted wave to her team and went home. It didn't take her long to get to the place she called home. She opened the big gate and waded through the tall grass that hadn't been cut yet. She had been gone for a few weeks, so she thought this would have been taken care of by now. Even if her mother didn't have time, the Uzumaki family had enough money to hire a genin team for a D-rank mission, even if her mother didn't. She changed what she said by letting her eyes wander over the sea of green. The Uzumaki had enough money to hire a few genin teams for D-rank missions. In fact, they could probably bump it up to a single C rank if they paid enough and let people ask for jobs from certain shinobi. She would have to talk to her mother about sending her brother on a well-paid C rank mission to clear the Uzumaki compound's grounds. They could thank him with a cold drink later, and it would be the first time in years that they could all be together. If they were really lucky and the gods were on their side, they might even be able to get him to stay in the compound or come once a week for dinner. Her mother may be obsessed with getting him back completely, but Naruto would be happy to just see him regularly at this point. She still had to say sorry for that fight. This would be a great chance to do something. When she walked in, the house was quiet. Her mother wasn't there, and there wasn't even a dish in the sink. She was probably doing something she thought would bring Naruto back to the family. Naruto was almost afraid to think about what her mother might have done while she was on her first C-rank mission. Something that would make the family even more split up, she would have to guess. Her intentions were good, but everything she did to win Naruto's favor seemed to go horribly wrong. She really needed to stop for a moment and think about these plans more carefully. She wanted him back just as much as her mother did, but acting so quickly wasn't going to help anyone, especially Naruto. Her mother didn't seem to understand that yet, but the sooner she did, the sooner they could really start moving toward being a family again. She sighed as she walked into her room and threw her stuff on her bed. She would go through and restock later. but right now she wanted to take a shower or maybe a nice, long bath. After an hour, she sat on her bed in just a towel and thought about what she would do for the rest of the day. She could go to bed early, which was a tempting idea, but there was still a lot of the day left and she didn't want to waste it. She really didn't have anything she needed to do, and other than perhaps getting something to eat, as she really didn't feel up to cooking, there wasn't anything she could think to do. If her mother was home, she'd have talked with her about the trip and asked about some sealing lessons, but she had no idea where the woman was or when she'd be home. She didn't really have any friends she could go see either. In fact, Ino, the Yamanaka heiress, was the closest thing she had to a friend. When she thought about the Yamanaka, it was only natural that she thought of the wolves she had seen in Nami no Kuni. Ino had talked a lot about the wolves who had brought down the Yamanaka clan, and she couldn't help but wonder if the shinobi she had seen in Wave were related to those in Konoha in some way. Was the group getting bigger? Had they started in Konoha and then gone somewhere else? It could have been a worldwide plan with an unknown goal. No matter what the truth was, though, Ino said that her brother had something to do with it. She could only hope the girl was wrong after seeing how the wolves worked in Nami no Kuni. What in the world would her brother be doing with that kind of group? Tsunami said that things could have been worse for them under Gado's rule if the wolves hadn't stepped in, but she had trouble believing that a group that stole money from the poor, killed their client and all his forces in cold blood, and bought young women in the middle of the street like it was nothing could have anything but their own best interests in mind. How could that kind of group be trusted with a country and the lives of all the people who lived there? She had to hope her brother hadn't found himself involved in something like this and was in over his head. Of course, if anyone had more information about the wolves or would be able to give her a better opinion on what she knew, it would be Ino. She had also heard that her father, Inoichi, and her brother had made a deal about the wolves. It could be a good idea to talk to him as well. Naruto decided to go to the Yamanaka compound, so she looked through her closet for something simple to wear. She and Ino might go get something to eat after that. Even better, she could invite Ino to lunch and they could talk about it all over lunch. Yes, that would definitely work. She was dressed well enough to be seen in public, so she quickly wrote her mother a note about where she was going and left it on the table in case her mother came back before she did. Hoped she wouldn't be too mad that she was going to see the Yamanaka. She hadn't liked them much lately, and she blamed them for most of her son's problems. When Naruto was back with the family, that would be something to work on, especially since he knew it wasn't Ino's or her clan's fault. Even though the Yamanaka compound was inside the village, like the Akamichi compound, and not in the clan district with most of the other clans, it didn't take long for her to get there. Strangely, though, it didn't take her long to get in either. Before she could even say a word, the guards opened the gates to the Yamanaka clan and stood at attention. How odd. Maybe Ino had spoken to them about granting her access or something. That was really the only reason she could think of that might explain the behavior. Unless the heiress had just sent for her and it was just a lucky coincidence that she was already there. Considering the problems in her family, it seemed unlikely that she would get lucky. Shrugging off the odd occurrence and the way everyone she passed seemed to give slight bows at her passing, she went straight to Ino's office, knowing how much time the Yamanaka princess spent poring over clan paperwork. A visit from a friend would be a welcome break for the girl, she was sure. When she knocked on the door, she was brought in right away. Perhaps the theory that she had been expected wasn't so far off the mark. Uzumaki-sama, I didn't think you'd be here so soon. The blonde heiress was sitting at her desk as usual, buried in paperwork. She didn't even look up at her visitor until she heard a confused, Uzumaki-sama. She was so focused on what she was doing at the time that she didn't even notice her visitor. Oh, Naruto-sama, I'm sorry. Your mother was supposed to come by today to look over some clan paperwork. Really? Naruto asked, looking confused. What did you ask her to do for you? Ino stared at her for a moment, as if she were puzzled by the question, before her eyes widened in understanding. You were on a mission, right? Asuma-sensei told me that, so it's not surprising that you don't know. What's up? While you were away, your mother called for a meeting of the greater clans and demanded recompense from the Yamanaka because our feud with your brother drove him to renounce his clan name. Wait, what? Why would she do that? Ino shrugged tiredly. Something to do with getting your brother to rejoin the clan, I would suspect. Not that it worked. He seemed rather displeased that we had been taken out from under his control just as he was starting to build us up again. After a few moments of awkward silence, Naruto finally got up the courage to ask the question to which she almost didn't want to know the answer. So, what did she really want from your group? The family. She stopped for a moment, unable to understand what Ino had said. Sorry, I don't think I understood you. The clan? You heard correctly. Ever since the calling of the greater clans, the Yamanaka clan has become the vassal of Clan Uzumaki. A curious look overtook the Yamanaka princess's face as she wondered aloud, not sure if we're part of the greater clans anymore after that. The Uzumaki are greater though, so it's possible. I'll have to ask Kushina-sama later to know if I'm expected to attend the meetings. Probably am, but maybe not in the capacity of a clan Hida. She stopped talking when she remembered that she had a visitor in her office. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just wondering about some future clan business. Now, Naruko-sama, is there anything I can do for you? Don't call me that. Chan is fine. Okay, Naruko-chan, she said quietly. She tried the name a few more times, getting used to how it felt on her tongue and ignoring the clan training that told her to be respectful to the heiress of the lording clan. So, tell me, what did you want from me? Well, it was all about the wolves. That caught Ino's attention right away. Even though Kushina said the Yamanaka would be safe as the Uzumaki's vassal and Naruto told her that her clan was no longer the wolves' enemy, it would be a good idea to keep an eye on such a dangerous group. What about them? Do they have a new goal? Have they moved against the Uzumaki? They now had Nami no Kuni as their goal. What could they want in the land of waves? No, they wanted that. They're in charge now. Ino leaned back in her chair and tried to figure out what had just been said to her. They've taken over a county. Even to her, her voice was weak and hesitant, with a hint of amazement and disbelief. Her clan had been the target not long ago, but now that they had moved on to other things, they already ran a county. A good one, too, if she remembered what she learned. Yeah, they worked for Gato, a shipping magnate who took over years ago. When Gato tried to stop the villagers from fighting back, the wolves killed his men and then cut off his head. That does sound like the wolves, but are you sure it's the same band? Naruko did nothing but shrug. I don't know, I've never met the wolves here in Konoha. In Wave, they all wore snarling wolf masks and mostly wore gray. There was one with a hood and a mantle of white fur while we were there, and people called him the High Captain. He was the one who cut off Gato's head and said that the moon god had put Wave under the protection of the wolves. Ino looked at her with doubt when she said, the moon god? Well, I guess it could have been someone named Tsukiyomi, which is probably the name of their leader. I've never heard of a Tsukiyomi being part of them. I guess they didn't have much reason to talk about him here in Konoha. I've also never heard of a high captain, which is strange. What's up with that? Well, if it's the same group, Konoha's wolves seem to be just a small part. In Wave, they were led by a high captain, so why isn't there a high captain here to oversee whatever they're doing in Konoha? I don't know, maybe because it would get more attention. I've never seen any wolves here, and only your clan talks about them, but in Wave, they were out in the open and acted. She paused to think about how true her next statement was. They were just like the Anbu here on patrol. Some of them did things for Gato, but the rest sat on top of buildings overlooking the village and walked through the streets to keep an eye on the people. That could be it, but I still find it strange that a commanding officer isn't involved in anything they're doing here. I could see why they're more valuable, but surely the risk of losing them would be worth having a more stable setup within Konohagakure no Sato. Unless Ino looked at Naruko, unsure of her latest thought and wondering if she should share it with the heiress of the lording clan. Except for what? With a deep sigh, Ino kept talking about her new idea. Except if Naruto is in charge of them. No, I won't listen to that. Please just listen to me. Do you know anything about who these wolves are? She got a blank look from Ino. This group that no one believed existed had brought her clan to its knees. People were blamed for kidnapping and raping. The treasury was robbed. Threats and warnings were sent to her room while she slept, and the clan's reputation, which had been built up over generations, was ruined. She knew the wolves were a certain kind of people. There were no people there. It was wolves. They went after their prey and killed it with a show of brute force. Then they ate it without feeling bad about it. They were shinobi, and they were the most real and pure shinobi she had ever seen. Before there was peace and international law, before there were villages or even clans, the wolves stuck to the old ways. They did the same things as the first group. They were villagers who turned to robbery and sneaking, mercenaries and thieves who looked out for themselves first, then their families, and then everyone else. They didn't need fancy jutsu or names that people would remember like they do now. No, all they needed was a sharp blade and something to aim at. She probably knew what these wolves were better than Naruto could, but if she was asking that question, it was pretty clear that she had seen a glimpse of the wolves' true nature over in Wave, where they didn't have to hide from a village of shinobi who were unlikely to accept their presence and even less likely to accept what they did. "No, I have no idea what kind of people these wolves might be," said Ino in a dry tone. "They weren't even my clan's enemies or anything."
Naruto had to stop there, blushing in embarrassment.
"Sorry, I forgot who I was talking to." "Of course you do. But I love my brother, and to have him compared to those things makes me furious. I watched as they took money from people who didn't even have their own homes, saw how people shied away from them. I was there when they killed Gato and his men just because they were in their way. No survivors, no mercy. They were laughing. Laughing. They enjoyed it. And while I agree with them, I don't. They're not better." Naruto took a moment to gather herself. They bought people like they were cattle. A young woman who was only a few years older than us was sold to them in the middle of the street in the middle of the day so that her father could pay Gato's tax. All the wolves are bad people, if you can even call them that. They are just a group of thieves who are better organized and trained than everyone else. "You're right, they are," she said. This was the first time she'd heard that wolves behaved this way, but she wasn't too surprised. It was exactly like them. They didn't leave the Yamanaka clan alone out of pity or because they were too weak. Instead, Naruto wanted to use them as an example to show anyone who might try to fight him that even though he was just a clanless genin, he had power they couldn't hope to fight because they didn't know it existed. "How does someone dull a hidden blade?" "But they're strong," Ino said next. "More powerful than they should be because they're hidden. No one knows how dangerous they are, so no one is ready for them when they strike. That's how shinobi work. They use the world in the best way they can. No matter how bad they are, though, you can't deny that Naruto has something to do with them. Maybe he befriended a few that weren't so bad, or maybe he hired them because he knew how cruel they were, or maybe he was so desperate and alone that he had no choice." "Are you saying it's our fault?" The girl was no longer angry, and she seemed upset that her brother might have joined the wolves in part because of her. "No, not at all. It's not your fault that he joined the wolves any more than it's the Yamanaka clan's fault that he gave up the Uzumaki name. But your clan still gets hurt because of it. Someone will always be hurt. That's just how the world works." "That doesn't mean I like it." Ino smiled at her in a sad way. "Not many do, but the pain doesn't last forever. Your brother, for all the pain he's been through, seems to be doing well now. Even the Yamanaka clan are getting better. Sure, we've lost a lot, but we had even less not long ago. If you want to escape the cruelties of the world, you just have to keep going no matter what." "Thanks, Ino. Sorry to cut you off, but what were you saying about my brother and the wolves?" "I was saying that it was possible Naruto was their commanding officer or, at the very least, might have contact with one. My father talked to Naruto to make sure there were no Yamanaka casualties during the feud, and it was Naruto who told me the Yamanaka were no longer the wolves' enemies after I told him about our new vassalage. Even if he's not the commanding officer, he seems to be the voice of the wolves in Kono. It would keep the order of command without putting a high captain at risk, and Naruto lives in Konohagakure no Sado. Before he graduated, when the fight began, he was still a regular person. You already know that Shinobi Konoha and regular Konoha are almost like two different places. As a civilian, he didn't have to tell anyone about the wolves or what they were doing unless Konoha as a whole was in danger. Since they only went after the Yamanaka, they only had to worry about one clan instead of the whole village, and even if they were found out, they couldn't do much about it. "Well," she said in reply. "That depends on what he was actually doing. As someone to meet on behalf of the wolves or to pass on orders, he would have been pretty safe, and since he was against my clan, he was the perfect choice. That is, if the wolves were already planning to go after us. It's more likely that he was helping them set up in Konoha, and when I made the mistake of making him angry, the wolves couldn't be stopped from joining in. Why would he be a good choice? Why not pick someone who would stay a civilian? I don't know, it's all guesswork at this point. Naruto seems pretty mature, and he was pretty much alone in Konoha, which made him easy to approach. Without friends or family, he was almost always available, and no one asked about his whereabouts. Also, as a shinobi in training, it's likely that he could relate to the wolves and understand their actions better than a civilian who hadn't been exposed to the shinobi world." Naruto said, because he was all by himself. Ino had to wonder if the girl, which was strange to think of her as because they were both the same age, Naruko, on the other hand, seemed so much younger than her, and that could only be because she didn't have as much to worry about. She hadn't even heard the rest of what she said. Ino tried to reassure her, he was, and then he had the wolves. Whether they are part of them or just work with them for a nice paycheck, they support him. This is clear from the state of my clan and everything that has happened to us since he became our enemy. I guess you're right, Naruko said in a sad way. But we just left him with them, with the wolves. He shouldn't have had to deal with them. There's no way to know for sure. If the wolves were already coming to Konoha, he may have ended up working with them anyway. If they really are in Wave, then it's safe to say the group is global. I wouldn't be surprised if they pay well and are a good connection for any shinobi to have. Having a good relationship with a global organization could be very helpful. Besides, if he really likes working for or with them, do you really want to take that away? No, I suppose not. It's just that it makes me feel bad to think about him becoming like them. He has become so cold that he no longer cares about us. It would be easy for him to turn into one of those animals. Don't think he's as cold as you do. He might act that way around people in the Uzumaki clan and in public, but behind closed doors, he seems much more calm. And I think he does care about some people. It's just that you're not one of them right now, she said after a short pause. I know Naruko won't like it, but it needs to be said. She said, right now, instead of, anymore, to avoid making things sound like they were over, and it seemed to work as far as she could tell. I know, we left him, and he went on. I don't blame him, and I didn't think he would stay the same after what happened. During the trip, it didn't seem so real, and it didn't seem that important, like it didn't matter that much. It was an opportunity for me to train and see the world. It must have been so different for him, she said with fire in her eyes. But I will make it up to him no matter what. I'll have my brother back and our family will be whole once more. Suddenly, Ino looked like she was in a lot of pain. Is there something wrong, Ino? Well, it's just that Naruto and your mother met here at the Yamanaka compound while you were gone. What? What went wrong? Was there a change? Oh, gods, please tell me that mom didn't push him even farther away. It didn't seem like anything had changed between them. Naruto was always calm and unconcerned about what was going on around him, while your mom was worried about making a mistake. Then why bring it up? During the meal, Kushina-sama said that I seem to be getting along well with him and that he hasn't shown any signs of not liking my presence. After he told me I looked good and she hadn't been able to get him to go back to the Uzumaki clan in any other way, she told him she could set up a marriage between Naruto and me if he wanted. Naruko groaned. I don't understand why she thinks it's a good idea. She always talks about finding Nikun a woman as if that would make everything better. Well, maybe if she had brought the woman back with her. Ino trailed off at Naruko's serious look. I can see why she might have thought it was a good idea at first, you know. It sounds like the dream gift of a teenage boy. She continued, but from what I know, Naruto is already close to several women. Hinata is the same age as him, and they met at the academy. He's often seen with Mitarashi Anko, a Tokubetsu Junin with whom my dad has worked, and I know he sleeps with at least some of the female wolves. So, I guess she's not too far off when she talks about women. The only problem is that he doesn't need any from her. Naruko's look of anger hadn't changed at all. That's not something Nikun needs to worry about right now. He needs to keep working as a shinobi and become a part of the family once more. After that, he can add to it, but for now, me and Ka-san are the only two women he needs in his life. Ino's face turned from bright pink to a deep, dark red very quickly. Well, that brings us back to why I was telling you about that night in the first place. Oh, okay, keep going. Naruto said that if he had wanted me, I would already be his, and then he went on to talk about how you weren't there. Ino turned a bit in her chair to look out a well-placed window to avoid the glare that was burning into her head. I don't know if he was serious or just trying to get her to notice what she was trying to do with me, but he said that maybe if she gave him you, their problems would be solved. Yamanaka Ino had never seen a face that was both horrified and red-faced before today. Hey, what? The thought that her mother would give her away like a possession was horrible, but the idea of belonging to her brother made her think of the days she had the talk with her mother and what she had unintentionally said about her brother, and their mother. It didn't help that she had said earlier that Naruto only needed her and her mother in his life right now. She could feel her cheeks turning red, and the thoughts that went through her head made her feel terrible. After a few awkward seconds of silence during which Naruko tried hard to calm down and Ino stopped blushing, the Uzumaki princess spoke up again. What did my mom say? Her mother hadn't been thinking straight lately, and she had good reason to be afraid of the answer she might get. Sure, the family would be together again, but families weren't supposed to be together like that. Ever. Ino swallowed nervously. She knew that the longer she waited to say it, the more upset her fellow blonde would be. But how do you tell someone that their mother was actually thinking about giving them as a gift to their estranged brother? She went silent. I think that she was considering doing it. When she realized we were all watching her, she told us, "You weren't there because you were on a mission outside of Konoha." Ino continued. She didn't talk about it again, but she didn't say anything against the idea, either. Naruto didn't say why he asked, so I'm still not sure if he was really after her like that, but if I had to guess, I'd say he's not going to change her mind if she thinks he does. I wouldn't be surprised if he just waited to see what your mom did. He's probably wondering how far she'll go to get back into his life. I see. Naruto seemed a little shocked by the news, but she had a right to know. If nothing came of it, that was great, but she should still know what her mother had done. If something did happen, at least she was prepared. I know we left him, but mother's actions should show him how much we want to make up for it, whether they work or not. The Mindwalker took a moment to think about how to answer the question. I think you said it yourself before, huh? He needs to put his job and family ahead of everything else. Isn't that what you said? Yeah, but we're related to him. Kushina asked him why he wouldn't go home to his mother. He said that his mother and sister had left 4 years ago, and he hadn't seen them since.
No. The word came out almost like a whine, but it was clear that she was giving up.
He said he had a new family now, and I think that family is the wolves, or at least some of them. I could be wrong, but it sounds like he might be talking about Hinata as his family. When he said that his family had left, he didn't sound sad. He was only telling the truth. That's what you need to pay attention to. That we're not in his life anymore and he doesn't care.
Quote. Exactly. You are no longer in his life, so you can go back into it. He's moved on, even though it might not be easy.
How good is that? Because it doesn't look like he's mad at you. Don't you see? He acts like he didn't know either of you before you came back. I know he hasn't forgotten about you, which means he's trying to be nice and act like nothing happened. Did it? Yes, it's over and done with, and it will affect all of you for the rest of your lives. It will take some time for him to trust you again, but you have to start somewhere, and it's better to start at the beginning of the race than 2 miles in. Since you and your mother are both kunoichi, you are his comrades whether he likes it or not. Start regaining his trust and slowly work your way back into his life, but remember that he is now your comrade as well. Treat him with respect and don't push too hard. If you ever find yourself on a mission with him, do everything you can to impress him without looking like a fool. If you can make him like you, he'll be interested in you and keep you around. He is like that. It's good because it gives me a better chance, right? You're right. Well, I guess that makes me feel a little better. Just treat him like any other shinobi I meet in Konoha, right? It has a lot better chance of working than trying to force yourself back into his life. And keep in mind that I'm not saying he'll like you right away or even that it will work. I can't think of a better way for you to be a part of his life. Thank you, Ino. Thank you, Naruko-chan. Was there anything else I could tell you or help you with? I need to finish getting ready for your mom's visit. No, but I was wondering if your dad might be free one of these days so we could all talk about what we know about the wolves. I'm sure he sees things we don't, and I'm sure he'd be interested in hearing about them from us. I'll tell him about it. I'm sure he'll be interested. Thank you. Then I'll go. We'll see you again, Ino. Have a good day, Naruko-chan, Ino said, frowning at her desk. Now where the hell did I put that file? Some of the best kunoichi in Konoha would often gather at a table in one of the village's many restaurants. What was strange, though, was the rather sad mood that hung around them. When Mitarashi Anko was quiet in a group, especially with her best friend Yuhi Kurenai and the usually active Inuzuka Hana, it wasn't usually a good sign. Usually, it was hard to tell from a distance whether Anko's lack of luck was the reason she wasn't as happy as usual or if someone was about to have bad luck. Today, though, those around her could tell anyone who cared to look that she wasn't up to her usual mischief. That was good news in and of itself, but whatever was holding them all down probably wasn't. Even that depends on how you look at it. It was good news in some ways, but it was also bad news. It wouldn't be wrong to just call it news and leave it at that, since that's all it was in the end. These kunoichi, on the other hand, didn't like that news, so it was bad news. So you're going to leave? Azuki Yugo, the Ambu cat, was probably the most level-headed of the group. She had no big problems and was as calm as one would expect from a member of Konoha's most elite division. She was usually the voice of reason in the group. Not that they always paid attention. Yeah, me and the others are leaving tomorrow. Hana, like most Inuzuka, was a bit wild. She was more reserved than many of her relatives, but she still stood out among her friends. She was always up for some fun, but unlike her best friend Anko, she usually kept things from getting out of hand. You have to leave. I know you're the heiress and all, but what could be so important that you have to leave? As the second most sensible, Kurenai was counted on to help Yugo keep the other two in line when things got too crazy. She was also the only one who could get the Anbu to loosen up a bit so they could all have fun together. Well, I don't have to, but it's important to the clan and Ka-san thinks it will help me when I run the clan. You know, you still haven't told us what you'll be doing outside of Hino Kuni or where you're going. Mitarashi Anko was, without a doubt, the wildest of the four. Unlike the others, she didn't really care about the consequences of her actions and was more focused on having fun. That's because I shouldn't do it. It has to do with the clan, and my mother would prefer that it not get out of the clan. At least for now. She might not care later, but this is too important to risk getting out right now. Yugo frowned and said, "You almost sound like what you're doing could be considered treason. You're not about to do something stupid, are you?" Anko said, "Yeah, you know that's my job." "Yeah, stupid, like taking a new genin on a C-rank mission, blowing up a casino, and then sleeping with him in a town far from Konoha." Kurenai hadn't been too happy to hear that. Maybe if they had taken someone else with them, even a hidden wolf guard, she wouldn't have been so upset. The council and people of Konoha didn't like the Tokubetsu Junin very much, and they didn't need more reasons to dislike her. Hearing that she got pregnant while on a C-rank mission with the former Uzumaki prince wouldn't make anyone like her anymore. Of course, then Kushina would have been a problem, too. If that had happened, the woman would have gone crazy. She might be able to persuade Yugo to go with them on all future missions. That would help her feel more at ease. "You're just jealous, Kyo-chan. It's not my fault that you haven't tried to make a teddy bear out of him yet. Since he sleeps with women all the time, he probably wouldn't think much of it if you joined him. He let you use him like a stuffed animal." On the Genjutsu mistress's face, there was just a hint of a blush. Anko smirked. "No, I ended up sprawled all over him. Your thing is that you want a cuddle buddy. Girls, when you're done, can we get back to what we were talking about? I think it's more important to talk about Hana's impending departure than to talk about what the two of you are doing in bed with a genin," Yugo said. As usual, Anko didn't care. "Oh, that's dull. I'd rather talk about Naruto-kun instead. Have you slept with him yet? I know you two used to train together for a while. Did you ever take a shower at his house afterward?" "Well, once or twice, sure. Most of the time, it was because he was hurt and I could help him." "How about the shower?" When Anko said that, the usually calm face of the Anbu turned red.
"Look at the wound." Quote, "So you've never showered together? Never seen him naked?" Anko kept asking, enjoying the fact that the woman was reacting to her questions.
Well, she hadn't seen him completely naked, but she had seen him pretty close to it. She also hadn't shared a shower with him, but that didn't change the fact that she had helped him clean the blood off of him after his fight with Naruto. It was about as close as one could get to answering Anko's questions. "Oh my god, you didn't you? The one of us who is the most shy has gotten the farthest with our favorite genin. All I did was help him clean up. You cleaned him up. Damn girl, you move fast." Anko said, "To think that Kurenai is worried about me." Kurenai did look surprised by Yugo's confessions, but Hana just looked amused. She didn't know who Naruto was, but now she kind of wanted to meet him, if only to hear his side of these stories. "That's not the case. He hurt himself during a fight, and the Hokage asked me to help him. We went back to his place so I could help him feel better. And you just happened to need to wash him," she said. The Tokubetsu Junin didn't seem to believe her. "I'm sure he would have told you he was fine and could do it himself, which means you insisted on doing it for him. I didn't think the cat would be so aggressive with a genin." Anko, "I don't know why you feel bad about it. I would have done the same thing. In fact, Yugo, you're doing so well that the rest of us look like amateurs." Kurenai said, "We're not going to try anything, Anko. I hope you remember that." "No, we're not, but that doesn't mean it's not happening," Anko said. "So, when was this?" "Team meetings started today. Before them, he sparred with his sister, and after he cut off her head, she didn't hold back much and threw trees at him." Anko naturally paid attention to what was most important. Oh? So on the same day Kure-chan told me I shouldn't sleep with him in almost nothing, he was getting a good look at his sister's tits and letting Yugo rub her hands all over his body. Well, that's not fair at all. I guess I don't have to hold back when I see him again. Kurenai sighed as Yugo, who was blushing, put her head on the table where they were sitting. Can we talk about Hana's mysterious clan mission again now? Asked the group's only Junin sensei. There's not much to say, the woman admitted. It's clan business that might be good for Konoha as a whole in the long run. I'll be gone for anywhere from 2 weeks to as long as it's my turn to lead the Inuzuka clan. That long. From where she was sitting at the table, Yugo looked up at the Inuzuka heir who had just sat back and listened to them talk. Kurenai said, if that's true, we might never see you again. Anko didn't seem bothered by the news. Oh, she'll be fine. And if she's gone too long, we'll just find her and pay her a visit. Even so, it's kind of a shame. Hana took the bait with care. You know what's kind of sad? If you like Naruto, you'll miss out on all the fun. Yugo and Kurenai groaned quietly as they were brought back to the topic they had been trying to avoid. Hana just smiled and decided to have some fun herself. Oh, I guess you're right, she said. It's too bad, because he sounds great. Who knows how far I might have gone if I had known it could be my last chance. It took everything she had not to laugh at the dumbfounded looks on the faces of the 2 calmest people in the group. Anko, as expected, had a smile on his face. Well, Anko, the Inuzuka heiress went on, you don't happen to know if he's free right now, do you? I should make the most of the time I have left with him. Wouldn't want to throw any away. The smile on Anko's face went away, and she looked pretty sad. I haven't seen him recently, and I don't know where he is. I keep trying to go see him, but his little girlfriend Mai tells me he's still busy with personal things. He's dating someone. That made the conversation the group had been having before a little strange. Going after Jenin was one thing, and she didn't judge others for their tastes, which is to be expected considering how many of her clanmates had fallen in love with their companions and weren't ashamed to talk about it in public, but going after someone who's in a relationship was quite another. No, we don't think he does, but there's a young woman who is often with him and gets upset easily when it comes to Naruto. If nothing else, the girl likes him, Kurenai explained. Are you sure that they're not dating? Asked Hana. When Kurenai heard this, he frowned deeply. No, he took her and Anko out to dinner, and she leaves his apartment almost every time we get there, even if it's early in the morning. Anko added, they looked good together, and it would make sense if they were a couple, but I don't get the feeling they're exclusive. Why is that? This time, Yugo asked, wanting to know more about her old student's personal life. Anko pointed across the restaurant to where Inuzuka Sume was sitting next to a young woman with dark hair. Because she seems to be out with Hana's mother right now. She might be cheating on him, but I don't think he'd care, especially if they let him watch. Hana was next to get a red face. Can't say I blame him, Yugo said softly. What teenager wouldn't like that? A gay one, Anko said quickly, then stopped when she heard herself say it. She and Kurenai both looked shocked. You don't think, began Kurenai. Well, he hasn't done anything to us, and there are plenty of women who don't mind sleeping with him. Hana's embarrassment turned into laughter as she saw Anko's look of horror get worse. Heya, is he gay? Kurenai looked like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. What? That's not true, Anko said. How the fuck am I supposed to thank him if he's gay? Hana had no choice. She laughed out loud. 2 fingers gently moved down black feathers as purple eyes looked at the paper in his other hand. It only took a few lines to figure out who wrote it, and he was pleasantly surprised to find out he was wrong. Uchiha Itachi, a rouge shinobi from Konohagakure no Sado, was known for using crows in his techniques, so when a black bird brought him a roll of paper, he was suspicious. It didn't help that the bird was wearing the Uchiha's signature fan on its leg. Even though the bird was a raven, that didn't make him less careful. One had to remember that Itachi wasn't the only Uchiha, still Olivia he knew of 3, and the Sandaime had said that more bodies were missing. Itachi also wasn't the first person to be linked to the Midnight Birds. The sender seemed to know that they were no longer the main Uchiha associated with birds, so they sent a raven instead. He didn't think it mattered much this time, since he had already reached the same conclusion, but he would now know for future visits. Other than the piece of metal with the Uchiha fan on it, the bird didn't seem to be anything special, and there was nothing about it that made him think it was a summon. If it was just a trained bird, he was very impressed with both it and its owner. He didn't know how the bird and its owner knew where to find him, and if the bird had found him without the owner knowing where he was, that was even more impressive. He didn't pay much attention to the bird, though. Instead, he kept his attention on the letter in his hand. She had said she was a spy for him, and it seemed like she was doing her best to keep her word. Unfortunately, her report wasn't much, even though she was with a group she said was made up of S-rank criminals. They were just getting started, and not much was happening. In between apologies for not having a proper report, she gave him the most complete profile of every member she could. To make it more interesting, she included both herself and her alter ego, someone named Toby, and described the hidden leadership within the group. Amana, or perhaps a plant, as she admitted in her writing, named Zetsu was in charge of a plan that the figurehead leader, Pain, did not know about. She made sure to say how upset she was with how messed up their chain of command was and how confusing it was to not always know who was in charge. Aside from what she knew about the group's members, where they were at the time, and what their main goal was, the letter didn't have much information. It did, however, ask about his health and tell him to get a lot of rest and eat his vegetables.
As he read over those parts, he couldn't help but smile.
Since she had lost her own family, it seemed like she was trying to be his mother, or maybe she thought he was her son. Either way, she wanted to make sure he was taken care of, and he thought it was funny. He was in charge of a group of mercenaries that had just taken over a country, and a Uchiha clan member who had gotten away was hiding in a group of S-rank shinobi in AIM and telling him to get a good night's sleep.
Of course, speaking of the Uchiha, he still hadn't had a chance to ask one Uchiha Sasuke, sole recognized survivor of the Uchiha clan massacre, what his relations to her were. He could ask her himself, but it would be terrible to get her hopes up at another family member when she couldn't visit him. If they weren't closely related, then great. There was a big chance the two of them had never crossed paths and she wouldn't feel too bad about not being able to contact them.
If they were, then too damn bad, she was his now. As he kept petting her trained raven, a small smile began to form on his lips. Yes, Makoto Uchiha was his, and he wasn't going to let her go.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.